Okay, good evening. This is East Lyme Board of Selectmen special meeting for the purpose of budget review at East Lyme Town Hall. It's February 3rd, 2025, and it's 5:30. We'll rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so this is our first official meeting as we start to study the budget and go through the various sections. Tonight we're going to look at IT, emergency management, dispatch, police, animal control, and East Lyme Fire Service. Everybody's been provided with a budget book, and that'll be the starting point. And we've worked very hard. Kevin Gervais has spent a lot of time preparing the books and meeting with myself and the other department heads to come up with the best proposal that we can and still keep intact the services that we require. So with no further ado, we will get started. Our first section tonight is section 109, information technology. I think we have a presentation. Hi, Dan.
Good evening.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Okay. I know we have a lot of departments, so I'll try to be concise, but if there's anything you want me to explain any deeper, just please let me know. So I'll give you just a brief kind of overview of the past year, where we are, and kind of the direction that we're headed. This past year saw the addition of an IT engineer in our department, which was a huge add for us. It's only been on for, is Jason here? It's only been on for a few months, but already starting to see sort of the load balance out where we can focus more on projects and not just the day-to-day. So his primary day-to-day is over at the police department, but also working on projects around town. So that's been a huge help, and going forward is going to be fundamental in pushing a lot of these initiatives forward. We did a full upgrade of the servers here at Town Hall. Some of that's still in progress, but all that's moving on to new equipment. And they'll likely be the last servers that the town buys for this building. Everything will either be over at the public safety building or up in the cloud for the next round. So this is our last major server purchase for a while. Still rolling through the phone systems. This upcoming year is going to be a big focus on cybersecurity. Also, the IT department has been taking sort of a funnel point for a lot of the radio infrastructure and communications. Just trying to pull all the different pieces in from around town and kind of get those organized while we're making decisions. We are currently, I had been working on a redesign of how all the buildings interconnect in town, and we had a plan laid out for 5 and 10 years to get fiber to all the buildings in town and kind of centrally link them back to the public safety building. So we had a little bit of money every year going forward for that. We actually just found out that we got the first round of a grant for $100,000, which is going to cover 4 of our main buildings for fiber hookup. And then we're also into the second round on an additional $300,000 of funding, which will support the rest of the town. So all of the town would be linked by fiber then, and all covered by grant. It's not a matching grant, it's just a full funded grant. So as we get into the budget, I can tell you I've highlighted a few of the big changes from last year, the big increases, but in general the increases fall under licensing, which we don't have a lot of control over. There's been a good portion of budget dollars that have been moved from other budgets into the IT budget, if it seemed to make more sense and kind of consolidate some of that. I'll go individually here so we can sort of go through it. So on the first main page there, the general budget page, the only real increase I want to point out there, because it makes sense, is last year under line 300, under operating expenses, we had $8,200 there. This year we have $34,000. There's two reasons for that. The main reason is that that line was moved over. There was some funds moved over from the capital line that we decided was better in operations, and that is our PC replacement dollars. And the number, how we arrived at that number is we went through town and calculated the number of Windows 10 machines that will not be eligible in November for upgrade to Windows 11, so they'll no longer be supported as of November. So that dollar amount is to cover our regular 5-year PC replacement plan, as well as get us up to date. So we're not as of November, we would start to get charged monthly for each of the Windows 10 machines that we have. So this will allow us to get up to date and stay on track with that plan without additional expenditure. Another number that went up, I highlighted here, a few $1,000s, is the copier maintenance line. So I've been in detailed discussions with Kevin and the department heads and Dan as well. So for every dollar that you see the copier maintenance budget goes up, it replaces about $4 to $5 that we're not spending on standalone desktop printers with expensive toner. So for example, there's two printers in the detective's office. They went to order or asking for advice on ordering toner for replacing the cartridges, and it was close to $1,400. To add the printer to the lease, I think, was $240 for the year. So it makes a lot more sense to get rid of as many of those small, expensive printers as we can and get them under the copier lease. So you see this number go up, but you don't necessarily see that money immediately trickle back from the other budgets. So if we go to the breakdown, I can go through some of the bigger numbers here. A lot of things stay the same. Our antivirus software, we are going to be changing versions of software to a more advanced version, and this will allow us to fulfill some of our needs as far as cybersecurity goes, and being eligible for cybersecurity insurance. Our current antivirus in the form that it's in isn't acceptable for cybersecurity insurance. If we go down a little bit further, there's another line there, Adobe licensing. So this is a new line, and again, this is one of those consolidation lines. So throughout the town, we have people who purchase their own licenses. We worked with HR to go out and see who needed a license for Adobe, who was paying for them already. So by consolidating all those licenses and getting a reduced rate, we're able to, right now we cover about 20 employees who all pay out of their own departments for Adobe licensing. For about the same price, we'll be able to cover the full 30 that put forth that they had a need for it in town. So for about the same amount. But again, it's a line up in my budget, but you won't see that come back right away. But over time, that should trickle back in from the other departments. We go down to comm services. So our phone, there's a phone line there. Telephones went from 23.9 to 26.7. So that number went up a little bit. What this covers, so that covers our phone lines as well as our new phones and phone system. Our new phone system is a cloud system. So just to give you an idea of cost, we had looked at replacing the phone system here, and it was going to be between $40,000 and $80,000, and approximately $5,000 to $6,000 a year in maintenance costs for that. Our line costs are about $19,000. So we're paying $26,000, which is slightly more, but that covers all of our phone system maintenance, and we didn't have to buy a phone system. So that's our full. So the lines represent about $20,000 of that, so we pay about $6,000 year to year, which is just about equivalent to the maintenance cost without having to put out $80,000 one-time purchase. If If we go down a little further, you'll see there's a heading EOC breakout move. So the lines under there were previously in emergency management, since we're trying to consolidate and save money where we can. So by bringing all the phone lines together, I can negotiate for better contracts. We can make changes and get some savings there. But the first step in that is bringing it into the IT budget. So those lines all there have been moved over. So that increase is about, in my budget, is about $75,000, but those are just direct moves from the emergency management budget. A little further down, there was it may be on your sheet, a GIS annual licensing and hosting. There was hosting for scanned documents. That's tied to a scanning project that the land department was going to do, but if they don't do the scanning project, then I don't need the storage for it. So they're not doing the scanning project this year, so that number came out. So it might show in there, but it doesn't show reflect on the front page. Let's see. So the back, this is mostly lines for the PD and dispatch, and public safety in general. So a big increase here is, you can see the Axon body camera licensing. For the first few years of the contract, when the body cameras were purchased, they get a reduced rate. This is the first year that they are no longer getting the reduced rate. So $84,000 is the licensing cost for the police body and car cameras. Their scheduling software, no changes in the software, but the licensing cost just about doubled. Same with the Power DMS, which is their policy and compliancy software. That went up about $2,000. Again, no changes, just the increase in licensing. We go down a little further. There's this PowerPhone medical dispatch software. This was previously a semi-free software used by dispatch for training and various dispatch. Sorry, I couldn't read my own writing. Various dispatch items. Now there is a cost associated with that at about $3,000 when it was essentially free earlier. We have further quality assurance dispatch training software that has been added, which is about $3,400, and telepartner software. So from dispatch training software down to the end, those are all, aside from the CEN, those are all new software purchases that are required by the police or emergency services, and that portion alone, so that's, you see another $30,000 increase in my budget is all newly acquired or newly needed software in the police department. So, well, in general, the budget it appears to be up much more over last year. There's a lot of consolidation and cost savings where we can. So, does anybody have any questions or clarification?
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a couple.
Okay.
You spoke earlier about the Windows 10 transition
Yes.
to Windows 11.
Correct.
Is that separate machines that are going to be needed to make that happen?
So for the majority of the Windows 10 machines that are left in town, we can upgrade for free. They support Windows 11. There's about between 25 or 26 laptops or desktops that will not be eligible to be upgraded from 10 to 11. So they'll be replaced as part of the 5-year PC replacement plan. So this year was a little heavier. In my first year of budgeting, this is my third, we had put in $24,000 a year, and that would cover us, after 5 years, we would be 100% replaced. So that would get us on a 5-year replacement schedule. Last year, that got cut to $24,000. So the extra there is to make up for that, and we need it this year because as of November, we will be paying a separate support charge for each of those machines that we can't upgrade. So
they will still be in service, they just won't be upgraded.
So they won't get security fixes. They won't get any updates at all. So from a security perspective, we've been working with the National Guard and Department of Homeland Security. And for cybersecurity insurance, having everything patched is kind of top on the list. So unsupported operating systems won't pass that.
Okay.
And again, it is in line with the 5-year plan the 5-year PC replacement plan. We were a little short last year, so this year we're kind of forced to go up to get everybody up to date.
Okay. I'm curious about the Adobe line also.
Yes.
So does that purchase the entire suite? Or just the
This is Adobe Acrobat Pro, so for modifying and editing PDF documents, and that's for 30 or 32 users. I can get you the exact number if you need it, but like I said, we did a survey of everyone, and that's the number that came back that had a true need. And I actually spoke to most of the people who use it, and how they do it now, if they don't have it, is they kind of beg somebody around town to get it. So again, all that money is being spent right now out of other budgets. So if we bring it here, we get 8 or 10 more licenses for the same amount. And so we can service more people in the town and spend the same amount of money. But again, you won't see a big Adobe line come out of anybody else's budget. They're small numbers one at a time, but it adds up.
I imagine this is completely separate from the education IT budget, but I know that there's a large investment in Adobe products at the education side of things. Is there a potential to kind of put those together?
Yeah, so we've just started having some discussions to see where sort of that overlap can be, because as I've gone through town and we're consolidating and bringing things in, there's all kinds of cost savings with merging things. So that's definitely something for the future. That isn't accounted for in this budget, however.
In my experience, I think there's an overabundance of licenses available to educators that just go unused that perhaps you could account for somehow.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to that. Anywhere we can save money, I'm
Are you speaking with like Mr. Grant Place or somebody over there, or you don't?
So I was working with I'm very terrible with names, the head of the superintendent, and he was going to put us together with the IT department, so we can kind of see where we can go from there.
Okay. My last question is about body cams.
Yes.
$50,000 increase represents about 25% of this overall budget. Is there an opportunity to just say we're going to walk and go to another vendor, or is this something that has tons of costs sunk into setup?
So there's a real lot of setup and cost that went into the implementation. So mounting all the cameras in all the cars, getting all the police officers set up, they all report back to evidence.com. Now this was not a surprise. That discounted rate was made very clear at the beginning of the contract with Axon. That you get a few years to kind of get you on board and to ease the. I'm going to talk a little bit more.
Yeah. So we're at the point right now where the original investment we had done an appropriation for. OPM had some grant money, basically a pool that was a few $100,000, and at that point it was a free for all, right? So nobody was guaranteed any specific percentage of that grant funding when this was implemented through the police accountability bill. Our share of that, I think, was under $10,000 because of the way the funding came out. So initially, that contract was split over a year. So we just finished our first contract with Axon, had to sign on for another contract with them for another 5 years. So this is based on not doing the appropriation and getting all that funding and putting this project together the way we originally had done 5 years ago. This was the best way. By getting in a little bit early, we actually saved ourselves, I think, another $90 or $100,000 by doing it this way and splitting these payments over 5 years. So we are realizing an increase annually. However, it's the same cost, but less because we did a little bit early over this 5-year period. Yes, there are other vendors out there. However, most of those vendors are starting to kind of die out. Like WatchGuard, for example. I just read an email yesterday. I had another PD looking to get rid of all their WatchGuard material they have, and they're swapping over to Axon. It's more reliable, just a better system, a better setup that they have versus what is actually out there. So we're kind of limited as to the products that we're able to choose from.
Going forward, this will just be represented in the IT budget, or is this going to be something that appears in both budgets?
No, this will be represented within the IT budget. So Dan and I had sat down and like he's done with every other department head, and gone over, I tried to get as many updated pricing as I can. Yes, it's a little bit early in the year. A lot of things go up kind of July 1, so some speculation as far as, one of the vendors say, we're going up about 5%. So maybe that equates to $2,500 for the year. But we try to get nailed down the best price we can and what we expect to have to pay after July 1. So with Axon, he's essentially taken all of our IT out of the police department budget. However, we do retain a very small line, and this kind of goes back to the Adobe thing. We have officers at the PD who actually pay for it out of their personal pocket, not out of the PD budget.
For Adobe?
For the Adobe, yes. So this is a welcome portion of that project that when they had gone with the survey out to everybody.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thanks. Any further questions, or did you want to?
I have a couple things that I want to point out. IT support with Star Computer, that was $37,308. It's at the bottom of the IT budget list. And that's going to zero now.
That's going to zero,
And you've
correct.
taken, your department has, Jason's help has taken over that responsibility that
Yeah, and
before we were paying Star. to do
Yeah,
that
so
in-house.
we were paying for consulting services, and then there was a separate fee that we were paying for a 24/7, 365 coverage to have somebody available. So we haven't paid that in the last 2 years, so I took that
Yeah.
over my first year. So we substantially reduced that to cover
Yeah.
our internal expenses.
So that's a cost savings associated with.
There is,
your
and
department.
there's a lot of small projects that we work on. One, for instance, that Jason has taken the helm on, is all of the cars have cellular modems in them, and we pay through FirstNet, through AT&T, we pay $39 a car. What we were able to work out with them is they have a tiered data structure, which is as low as $10 a month and up to the $39. And if the cars or the cellular chips don't use much data, the lowest you pay is $9.99, but if they use a ton, where it maxes is the $39. So what they pay already. So across 20 cars, and then we're also going to span that to our backup interconnect connections, which don't get much use because it's just there in case of an emergency. So those would go down to $10. So again, it's these little trickles of savings across town by bringing all this stuff together. That's what we're really going for.
And you really, to the extent possible, you've tried to consolidate the IT function within your department and
Correct.
talk with these other departments where we're seeing line item shifts going over to your department. That's because it's more cost effective and makes more sense.
It is.
To have
And
someone that understands the technology to be managing.
a lot of the departments would have a small line for, monitors, keyboards, mice, just things that they needed.
Yeah.
And bringing all those in together, Kevin and I brought a few of those together and reduced it overall because we won't need that much, because it's all in one place. So it's a little more efficient, and the consolidation always helps save money.
Are there any other questions? Candace, I know you're out there.
Yes, I am, and thank you. No, I have no questions at this time. Thank you so much for the presentation.
I just want to say thank you, Dan, to you and Jason for the hard work you're doing. I think it's really made an impact, and particularly with going after that grant for the $100,000 and now the $300,000. I mean, that's really going to push us way ahead of where we thought we could be.
It really does, and what that does over time, getting all those buildings linked, the end goal is to have essentially all the buildings will be linked back to the public safety building, which will have a very robust connection to the Connecticut CN, the fiber network. And by channeling all those other buildings there, that means every building, we no longer have to pay for a firewall replacement every 5 years. We no longer have to pay firewall maintenance every 5 years. We don't pay for a separate internet connection at those sites, and many of those locations have 2 internet connections. So if you extrapolate that out over 10, 15 years, it's a huge savings for the town, on top of being far more secure and just tenfold easier to manage because you only have one entry and exit point in the town instead of 9 that we have now. So.
Well, I just want to say publicly, I want to commend you on that, and that's a huge thing for our town. So
Thank you
very much.
I appreciate it.
You both.
Dan, the only thing I could offer is any merging with the education department?
So yeah, then that gets brought up every year. So it's a little bit above my pay grade, but I'm fully open to it. I think again with the consolidation, I think there's a lot of money in
Just what you
in
just said about the
crossover.
firewalls and
Right.
the redundancy and also the ease of working on stuff in one location too.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, are there any proposed changes by the board? Are we satisfied with the budget as it is?
I am.
You okay? Then if there are none, then we will move on to section 214, emergency management.
First, I need to say thank you to Dan Cleary for reducing my budget down to negative 24% this year. Rah, rah. And if we get that Adobe, you can take another $195 off of my budget. Spacebar? Okay, perfect. So because my budget isn't overly large, I think it's important to kind of give everybody a synopsis of what has been accomplished in the department over the past year. So I'm going to give you a quick summary on that, if that's all right.
Great.
So this year we have had cyber assessments done through CISA, which is the Cyber Infrastructure and Security Agency, a federal agency, as well as CTIC, our Connecticut Intelligence Center. They offer these services for free to municipalities. There are two parts to it. One is the cyber side and the other is the physical security side. So far, we have accomplished assessments at the water sewer facilities and at the town hall, and we have future assessments planned for the public safety building on March 20th, the community center on April 2nd, the fire department's on April 8th, and the field services building will be determined at a later date once Jason returns to the office. Again, the purpose is for protecting our critical infrastructure, identifying the vulnerabilities, and what they do for us is they go through and they do these intensive searches and they find issues or may not find issues, but whatever they do find, they put together in a comprehensive report and they provide that to us. We can then use that information to plan for future needs, and instead of saying this broke or this happened and now we have to fix it, we're kind of getting an advanced jump on what the potential could be for expenses and include that moving forward in capital improvement projects. So the next one, fiscal year 24-25, we have the Regional Emergency Support Function Committees. As you know, I'm a member of quite a few. Region 4, for those of you who may have forgotten, is it's made up of 41 towns and 2 tribal nations all along the eastern side of the state. I am currently ESF 5 Chair for Emergency Management. We meet monthly and have in-depth roundtable discussions about information on area incidents and lessons learned, which is a great learning experience for everyone. We also look very diligently into education opportunities for emergency management and other public safety entities that would be, working together at an incident. Most recently, I had touched base with the Emergency Management Director for Amtrak, and they are on target to release their new Acela train in April of this year, and they are looking to have a training for public safety personnel, including emergency management, fire, police, EMS, and even the coroner's office, as well as 911 dispatchers. And it would be giving them the whole rundown of the new features of the trains that are coming out. The windows are different, the connections are different, all these things that the first responders will need to know will be part of that training. So we're very close to securing a date, holding it at Camp Net and it's expected to happen in March, which would be great, because that would happen before they actually put those trains out on the track. Their anticipated date to do that is April of this year. But as the emergency management director said to me, that, well, it's the 2021 Acela train that they're just releasing. So I'll believe it when I see the trains rolling down the track. Yes, I'm also the ESF 5 chair for the school safety subcommittee for all of Region 4. We get together on a monthly basis as well and discuss concerns, safety concerns, security concerns that school systems have around the region. I'm also, there's another subcommittee of the subcommittee, which is the School Safety Reunification Planning Working Group. We have been working diligently over the past year to develop a school reunification plan. Primarily, it started off as educating parents, on what they would need to do if their child needed to be relocated to a different location in the process for picking them up. Because the biggest issue that public safety responders run across in an instance where there's something happening at a school is the parents just converge and they just want to get to their kids. And it detracts from their ability to do their job and to get things under control. So we thought the best way to do that is to educate, everyone, citizens, students, administrators, everyone alike, about the process and how simple it is to follow, and that's the quickest way to be reunited with their child. So that is currently scheduled to happen August 6th, which is a Wednesday. It's going to be held at the East Lyme Middle School. We have the blessing of the superintendent, Ms. Jeffrey Newton, has been extremely helpful. And the PTA is very excited. The presidents all said that they would get the information out to parents and students, and that I've already had good response from people interested in being participants. So that's August 6th. The next committee is the ESF 17 Cybersecurity Committee, which I'm also the chair of. That we get together monthly and we learn about the latest threat information from CISA and CTIC. And we also work hard to develop an annual training that's a regional event. This will be our 4th, I believe, cyber training that we'll be holding at Camp Net. We're shooting for late spring, early summer. The topic this year around is going to be a cyber attack on water and sewer critical facilities. So it's something that is out there. It's something that is a definite threat. And so we thought doing a deep dive into that with all the partners together is going to be beneficial for everyone. It'll present us with yet another opportunity, and Dan has been there and experienced it as well as Ann, where we're bringing IT into the command staff, with the people at the table that would be there should there be a cyber threat or cyber emergency. So everybody's on the same page. So future dates will be coming on that one. I also represent the Region 4 and the state cyber-wide meetings to provide reports to them. I am also on the REPT steering committee representing all the above ESFs to provide reports, and additionally attend the quarterly Millstone meetings and their annual briefings. Next slide. Training. I'm going to highlight the ones that are highlighted in yellow. There's more than what I'll talk about, but just a few of the key ones. Okay, it did there. First, I wanted to mention the Governor's Emergency Planning and Preparedness Initiative. This is something that happens annually, and this year it was a really interesting scenario. It was all about election security. We had the opportunity to bring in the town clerks, the registrars, everybody sitting in the EOC, and they were providing injects with things that were happening during election day. And it was a real big eye-opener for all of us. It ultimately ended up resulting in a complete rewrite of their emergency plans, which is almost 95% complete. And I hope to have that back to them by the end of the month. So that was a good training. We also had an invite from Electric Boat to the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program tabletop and news conference, of which Dan and Ann also accompanied me to that. It was very interesting to kind of become integrated with the partners on the other side of the river, and it was a very informative tabletop, and I'm glad that we were invited to attend. Let's see, by request, sorry, I'm just getting over the end of a cold. By request, we provided exercise evaluation for Bridebrook Rehabilitation Center for their evacuation drill. Ended up being a very informative exercise for them because they learned things that they had no idea about that, helped them move forward with their plans in the future. They invited us back. Officer Favaloro and I went together just last month and provided active threat training for the staff. Somebody that it's hard to say what the threat would be, but we kind of go around the whole scenario and what could potentially happen here and things you should look into. And they, again, were very appreciative for the information that we shared. All right, next slide. Health and Safety Committee. As you know, I'm chair of that as well. Our meetings consist of the regular reviewing of injury reports from employees and recommended preventative measures. We review employee training opportunities and try to provide as much training as possible throughout the year. We manage the municipal first aid and AEDs, and we are looking to, again, schedule the townwide building inspections for OSHA compliance to make sure that we're in compliance with their rules. We completed the 2024 building-wide trainings at Town Hall and the Community Center, and we brought back the Health and Safety Fair after a 10-year hiatus, and employees' feedback was very positive. So we're working again for the 2025 Health and Safety Fair, scheduling that for September 10th of 2025. Moving right along, grants. This is the current standing. We have Nuclear Safety Fund, 25-26 is in progress, so that's not included in this total here, $664,661 to date after 9 years. The Emergency Management Performance Grant is at $79,952, and we are ready to submit the 2026 EMPG grant, and that will bring in another $9,394, totaling $754,007 in grant funding through this department. My fourth attempt at congressionally directed spending through Senator Murphy and Blumenthal's offices was actually accepted. It is currently... It made its way through the approvals that it had to get to, and then it goes into this is the final budget, but it's on hold right now because they only fulfilled the budget through mid-March. Once the final budget is approved, it's yet to be determined whether or not this congressionally directed spending will be included. That would be unfortunate if it wasn't. But if it is, then we will have ourselves on the road to getting a new public safety communications tower at the PSB. And if we did get that, that would also put us up over $1 million in grant funding. So, thought that was good to share. All right, now we can get into the budget. So, let me turn to my copy here, it's easier to see. All right. So as far as the director notes, I have a portion of this stipend, as you probably know, has been funneled over to my salary as the interim emergency management director. We had discussed very early on that a deputy is needed in the department. For instance, if I'm, out sick or just unavailable or out of the country or whatever, there needs to be that deputy that is sworn to fill my shoes when I'm not here. So the discussion early on was depending on what the future holds, if that stipend is there and there's only an emergency management director and no longer a full-time paid deputy, that a stipend would be carved out of that current funding for the deputy, and the remaining portion would go towards the EMD budget salary. So then on to EOC activations for the staff. I just wanted to clarify, I removed $3,000 from that budget, okay? And that was assuming that the stipend for the deputy would be coming out of the current stipend for the director, like we had just talked about. Because if it doesn't, I need to put that $3,000 back to cover the cost of overtime that it would cost to fill the position if there was not a deputy in place. So financially speaking, it's a lot more financially smart to provide a stipend as opposed to an hourly rate. Let's see. I had put in the administrative assistant. I saw that it got cut, but I still felt it was important to talk about that a little bit. I'm an office of one, I think probably the last one in town. And as you all know, the extreme growth in emergency management and demands on the field since 2020 are exceptional. Between climate change, cyber threats, election security, and the, of course, unknown of what's around the corner, it's a lot for one person to keep up with. The expansions, what I consider exceed the sustainable capacity for one person over a long period of time. So I'm doing my best to keep it all together, and I'm doing everything that has to get done, and it's done in a timely fashion and as efficiently as I can. But not having the help prevents me from getting further out there and doing the things that our community needs to ensure that we are ready in the event of an emergency. Our goal in that respect is to strengthen community resilience and preparedness by educating residents, businesses, and responders about potential threats through public outreach, planning, available training and exercise opportunities, collaborative emergency response with open communication and agency coordination will strengthen East Lyme and their overall response, their coordination with local and regional partners, and community preparedness and resilience. So, that's my talking points. As you can see, the services and contracted operations have all been moved over to the IT budget, so that's zeroed out. All the phones, with the exception of one cell phone and equipment, is left in the telephone line account. I've reduced it from 2 cell phones to 1. Training, I've asked for a slight bump because we have the VOC emergency management software program that's been taken over by IT, but there are training courses that need to be taken to bring others up to speed to assist with this program, and so I've added that in. So the total increase in that line item is $1,300, and that's the reason for that. Transportation allowance has been eliminated thanks to my new vehicle. Appreciate that. Miscellaneous supplies has been reduced drastically because of, again, the miscellaneous supplies in that was our VOC subscription for $5,500. The additional mobile accessories we won't need. EOC activations, I was able to reduce that down to by $600. And EOC equipment and repairs, we're in a really good place with all the funding that we got from nuclear safety funding, and I'm hoping that everything works as it should. And oh, did it go? Want me to do this?
Might just be a second, 10 seconds.
Okay. Where was I? So anyway, I cut that by $1,250, assuming that with all the new equipment that we have, we're not going to have very much for a need for repairs at this time. Knock on wood. So the estimated grant revenues for this coming fiscal year are $36,066 for annual EMD salary and fringe benefits, as well as EMPG grant revenue in the amount of $10,333. Do you have any questions for me?
Jason, do you have,
I know the tower was a huge project, and we were at the CAP meeting, that was in as a cost. And now you're saying there's a possible for grant for that?
We are responsible for a portion of that. So if it's like 25% is the town's portion of it. So we will need that funding to cover our portion and any additional expenses that result from it, or if we want to put additional antennas or anything like that, that's going to be additional funding over and above the grant amount.
Will that antenna be able to be served other businesses? I have a person from my business that puts up antennas and leases out space.
Oh, absolutely. It's a potential revenue source for sure. I mean, you've got Rocky Neck State Park with 20,000 people there every weekend, and I'm sure they'd love to have a great signal with AT&T and Verizon on there, and it's a matter of, signing a lease with them and allowing them space on the tower, and it's a generating revenue for sure. Yeah.
We put the lights up at Ledyard High School. They were tall enough, and Ledyard, it was poor cell service at the time.
Yeah.
And we did enough to cover the power bill.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to put something out into the universe that maybe you can't help me with, but once that new tower is built, knock on wood, the old tower would still exist, I would assume. No one's going to tear it down and scrap it. That's going to be on a site that's not going away, that's right next to the schools. Is there potential for the schools to learn how to use that or to access that for a broadcasting club or having kids send out content over the airwaves?
What do you think, Jason?
There's potential aspects. If the school had a ham radio club or something like that, they could implement using that tower. That tower does, the tower at Boston Post, I assume you're referring to, does have some ham radio equipment on it currently. So it could definitely be used by them as well.
We could have our own little school radio station like CNI or something.
Theoretically, yeah.
I'd love to see a school EOC, teach kids all about emergency management.
I'm glad we're putting this out in the universe. We'll see what happens next year with the budget.
There you go. There you go. Any other questions?
let's see, is Candace on?
Here, yes, and thank you so much, Julie, for your presentation. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Candace. All right. John, anything?
Yes, sir.
We're good? All right, thank you.
Thank
you very
you.
much. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Next is dispatch. And that's section 215. Good evening.
Good evening. All right. So I'm gonna put this down here. Mike's a little sensitive. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to point out that I did pull all three of the budgets here that I'm presenting tonight, which is going to be dispatch, police, and the animal control, just to kind of get a current status on where we are at the end of January going into February. And actually, I was pleasantly surprised that PD was actually only at 52%. So that's a good number for us to be at this time of year. So all three budgets are on track for this current year. Due to some changes that were implemented earlier this year, the beginning of the fiscal year, kind of I like the whole new munis structure as far as the way that funding is approved and POs are approved. So that way, as a department head, we're aware of every dollar that's going out or being spent, because nothing can go out of that building without my approval, so at least there's a better accounting of things. And I think that that, along with a few changes I've implemented, have kind of brought us down into where we are today. So starting off with dispatch, the only real major increase that we're looking at right here is the longevity shift differential. Dispatchers in itself, the top line for payroll is due to some contractual raises, as well as a new dispatcher going from step 1 to step 2, so that'll bring everybody in line there. The overtime has gone up a little bit to compensate for that increase, and again, this is we've had this conversation for years, continue to have it for years during preliminary budget discussions. You know, you're looking at, in order to really quell that inflated number, we'd have to hire a couple more bodies, right? One person is not going to fix the overtime issue there. There was a contractual change with the dispatchers that gave first right of refusal for overtime shifts to the full-time dispatchers versus the part-time dispatchers, so if a shift opens up due to vacancy for vacation, sick time, whatever else they have in their PTO bank, that would go to a full-time dispatcher first, and then if that shift is not filled through one of the other 7 of them, then it would go out to the part-time staff. So this line basically covers all those vacation times, all the paid time off bank that each one of the dispatchers gets. We start off with, is it 2 shifts? It's 2 shifts per week that end up having to get filled the way it is right now. So you're looking at 2 shifts per week. There's 52 weeks. There's 104 shifts that we know right out of the gate that we have to fill due to that vacancies. So this is a conversation again that we've had with the town to try to figure out a way to fix this. Again, it's bringing somebody in, so it's not just their salary, it's all the fringe costs that go with that, such as insurances and things of that nature. Longevity shift differential, that is basically, you're going to see this in the police department budget when I get onto that one next as well. You're going to see a significant increase there, and this is just a way that things were looked at in the past years, or not accounted for properly. So this is basically bringing us up to the right number for the shift differential, which they're paid a little bit extra per shift for evening time and midnight shift versus the regular hours. And same thing goes with the police department. Training payroll stayed the same, and everything else is zeroed out. We've had 0 increases in training, uniform, miscellaneous supplies. We've been able to get through with that. There was actual expense in miscellaneous at $2,200 for the 2024, brought it down to $1,500, but by consolidating us into that building, we're able to, between the multiple departments, if they need supplies, whether it's pens or notebooks or something of that nature, and we have extra, we can provide it, and vice versa. Anybody have any questions?
Overtime is representing about a little less than a quarter of the budget as it stands right now. I'm seeing that this is an untenable situation going forward. Do you foresee potential contract negotiation cost savings in the future, or is this something that, like you said, you're talking to the town about trying to find a way to...
Talking to the town to try to find a way to work with it.
Let's see, Candace, any comments, questions?
Got some bolts.
Okay, we'll go to Don. Don, do you have any questions on this?
Just for ideas, I noticed we've had a couple of dispatchers leave to go to other dispatching positions. What do you think the biggest hurdle is or obstacle is for our people to leave? Where can we improve?
So it really boils down to pay. I mean, when you have towns that are surrounding us that pay a little bit better, give some other incentives that, I mean, they don't even have to be even that much greater than here. But if I'm that, young dispatcher, and some, we have some older dispatchers as well, but if I'm that young dispatcher who's just come on board, and I've only been here a year or less, or just a hair over, and another town is offering a better compensation package and maybe, another $1 or $2 more, then I'm probably gonna jump ship, and that's basically what we're finding out. I mean, what's that? And the pension is another major portion of it.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
I'll check with Candace again if you're there, if you have any questions or comments. Okay. So if not, then...
I am. Dan, can you hear me? Because I did respond the last time, and it
Oh, I
looked as
think you
though...
were on mute maybe, but, okay, we can hear you now.
We can hear you
So
now,
good.
yeah.
Okay, good. No, I don't have any comments and/or questions at this point. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. All right, then, if there isn't any further commentary, I guess we can move on to the police budget.
Why don't we do ACO? You want to do ACO? Yeah.
With the ACO first?
Yeah, just because it's pretty quick and there's really not much there to it. Yeah, probably.
I think we can just by agreement, take it out of order. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Just stay with that. Disregard. We're going to stay with police. We'll stay with the agenda. Let's just stay. Yeah,
Okay.
instead of making a motion to swap it. And yes, we gotta stick to the
You
agenda.
were right, we would have needed a motion.
Correct.
I stand corrected.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I'm making a couple notes here.
216, I believe?
Yep.
Yes, 216.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So starting off, first line police chief, that's a contract obligation there, so that would be the increase there. Part-time clerical, brought that number up to meet the amount of hours that Kathy is working. No, because that's 35, that's part-time. Part-time clerical. Yeah, no, the 620. Police officers, so there's a little bit of an increase here. We had, with the original budget, we have asked for, based on discussions with the police commission, they put a plan in place several years ago, looking to increase the department by 2 officers per year. Currently with the amount of residents in town, we should have 2.5 officers per 1,000. Currently, we stand at 1.5. There's a few things to this. We run a 3-man minimum shift. So what that means is there's always 1 supervisor on, so it'll be a sergeant with 2 officers. There's 3 patrol areas in town. If we have a prisoner, somebody has to stay at the PD. As far as the police, yes, we have dispatch there to observe them via camera, but for somebody to respond to a cell if there's an emergency or an issue, we have to have an officer there, so that, in theory, takes an officer off the road. In the police contract, this last time, they were able to negotiate during, from I guess Memorial Day through Labor Day, if we had 18 patrolmen, we could run with a 4-man minimum because the amount of call volume, the amount of people that come into town, so we basically double in population during the summer months. However, we have not been able to attain that 18 person because we either have somebody out on workers' comp for an injury. We've had retirements, so we're trying to basically, fill holes, right? So we're hired a new officer a couple months ago to fill a spot that we've had vacant since last February. And so the drive to this is to be able to provide the town with some more services that the department would have the ability to if we were able to hire a couple more officers. Based on the preliminary budget discussions that I had with Dan and Kevin, First Selectmen's proposed to reduce the 2 officers at this point, and not look at even a quarter of 1 for this year. So we have a reduction there. And Kevin, did we add the the holiday time into that?
We did. So if you
Okay.
look at that line, it's not adding a police officer, but we're still up almost 12%. Reason being, for the last couple of years, it hasn't appeared that we've budgeted for the holiday pay for police officers. It's 13 holidays?
Yeah,
times
it's
8 hours?
108 hours per officer, so that wasn't in there, so I had come up with the number for what it would be for the coming up fiscal year, brought it to Kevin, said, hey, where does this money actually come from? We just looked around, and we've added it to this line into the payroll line.
So that number's $140,000. So that number, I think, was just as much as those 2 police officers.
Correct. Yeah, it's about,
So-
I think it's about one, if you round it up, it was 160 for the 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that number accounts for that holiday pay and accounts for, the step increases for the police officers.
So the increase we do see is making the projection accurate, where in the past it wasn't accounted for how we perhaps should have. And given that we had to make that adjustment, this unfortunately wasn't the year that, I've supported adding police officers in the past. This budget year, we just have to forego it this time around.
Right. Yeah, so I sat down when I took the budget over this year and looked at everything that we had. And you'll see it, and I'll discuss the lines when we get there. But shift differential, the holidays, there were some things that just I couldn't find the answers for when I was looking at our overall budget. So made multiple graphs, went through, and we found those anomalies. The foot parade duty, that's gone up as $5,000, that's gone up 3%. We historically have gotten back from Celebrate East Lyme Day from Park and Rec a $5,000, I don't want to say it's not a bonus, right? It's not a revenue, but they would basically throw back $5,000 to the police department budget. That has not occurred the past couple of years since after COVID. So what I need to do is there is a cost borne on the PD, is I have to account for the amount of man hours and people for that day. So I've added that 5,000 in there to make sure that we stay afloat. Otherwise, that would have been a zero increase.
Yep.
Overtime, again, contractual obligation, so based on the raises, and again, with the amount of officers and their paid time off, fulfilling those vacancies. So again, the next large one you're going to see is the longevity shift differential line. So that accounts for 3 things. That accounts for longevity, so if an officer is here from 5 years and on, there are brackets. They're basically in 5-year brackets. So they are, the lowest amount is $200. If you're here 25 years and over, it's $800 annually. So that total out for this coming up year is going to be $9,900. Each detective gets a $3,000 stipend, so they get that split in half. So twice per year, July 1 they get $1,500. January 1st they get $1,500. That deals with the soft clothes that they wear that are outside the regular scope of their issued uniforms. And then the shift differential, at a minimum, just doing the basic math, the officers get 60 cents per hour for evening shift and midnight shift. So the calculation is based off of our 3-man minimum, right? So you're going to have 6 shifts per day, 9.25 hours times 60 cents over 365 days comes out to $31,054. So this is an accurate representation of at least the bare minimum contractual obligation, because there will be days where an evening shift or a midnight shift, just based on how our contract works, where you may have a few more officers. You could have 5 officers on, 4 officers on, but if one takes it off, well, then you're back down to your 3 or down to 4. We don't have to backfill that spot with somebody else because we're still meeting the obligation. So there is a little flexibility, and we do have a little contingency in our payroll to offset that if the need arose at the end of the year, which would be very nominal anyway. Training budget is basically left that the same as the previous year. It's actually a little bit, as for about $1,250 less than the prior year. Then the next line down, the contracted / operations. So that covers our computer maintenance, radio maintenance, and boat storage and maintenance. So we've combined those three prior line items into one line item. And we've reduced that a little bit because some of our money has gone now over to the IT budget. So that's why you're seeing the negative 7.1 or 7.41% there. Telephones is a little bit of an increase that pays for the police department telephones, internet, and related expenses for that. So this is something, again, working with Dan in trying to, consolidate services as IT is, with Jason now on board and having that extra body and trying to bring in all the numbers and figure out the best, most cost-effective way to do business for the town when it comes to these type of things. Professional business expenses, there's a little bit of an increase there. So that takes care of Law Enforcement Council, which is what we belong to here in the southeast region of the state. They are the ones that put on our, they do the entry-level testing, they do promotional testing, they do our recertification training. All officers are required minimum 60 hours every 3 years to maintain standards within the state and stay as a certified officer. They do all that training for us, so we're not out hiring other people to come in and try to get guys in and girls in on days off, time off. They're scheduled for a week. Throughout that 3 years, each officer, whether they go to the supervisor version or the officer version, so that takes care of that. They had a little bit of an increase this year. It went up 2.5% was the increase that from what we paid for last year. This takes care of the Connecticut Chiefs Police Association, the National Chiefs of Police Association, and a couple of the required meetings that they have throughout the year. There's a small cost to that. Other purchase services have been reduced down to $3,000 from $895, so that way again we're consolidating things. Boat fuel did request $7,000. We reduced it down to $6,500. When you look at the actual expense for 2024, you see it's only $2,400. There's a reason for that. The regional vessel that we share with Waterford was out of service for most of the boating season this year. That has twin 300 outboard motors on it, so that does absorb some fuel, but with that out of commission for most of the boating season and us only using our 21-foot skiff, obviously that doesn't absorb as much gas, so we shared that small boat with Waterford, went out during emergencies, went out for some search and rescues, especially once the regional boat got back into service. Unfortunately, we had that tragic accident at the mouth of the Connecticut River. That was fatality, so we spent numerous days sending officers over there to assist in the search and rescue portion of that. I did reduce it by $500. That's a shared thing we do with Waterford when we fuel up, so we kind of do this over a boating season versus the fiscal season, and this is something that was implemented probably about 10 years ago through the town. So if we do split these costs 50%, essentially, is what's going on here. Uniforms, there's a slight increase in uniforms. There's some things that the town is obligated to pay for, so instead of me pulling money from a different line, just ask for a minor increase there. The rest of that is contractual obligations. Miscellaneous supplies, I asked for a little bit higher. Helped town out and reduce that number by $600, but that's basically everything that allows to keep the PD running operationally throughout the year, as far as administrative things that we need to purchase. Canine maintenance is staying at zero. Training supplies, asked for quite a bit more, but you'll see the reduction from $89,000 down to $75,000 to $14,000. That's a trickle effect from not hiring two officers, right? So we're removing components that would require to outfit them. So that's why you're seeing such a drastic change there. Public relations, bringing that up just a little bit. That deals with, if we have to put ads in the paper, deals with National Night Out, which has been a huge success, and our guys, girls have done a great job with that over the past several years up at the school. And any of that type of thing. The police academy that we do normally put on annually, that assists with that. So we intend on doing that again this upcoming fiscal year. Prisoner expenses. This is a hard one. Actually, Kevin, I think this should be 4,300 versus 45 based on the email from the other day. Prisoner expenses, we're going 56,103.
I never got around to that.
Okay, that's fine. So that should be $4,300, not 4,500. That's a moving target, right? So that pays for food for prisoners. That pays for cleaning of the cells when we get contaminated with biohazard material. That pays for the breathalyzer machine, the Draeger, so the gas bottles that use for the breathalyzer machine, and a myriad of things for prisoner expenses. One of the things that we're looking to do is changing the way. We currently have a contract with an outside vendor to provide food services. Unfortunately, we can't do it with the state next door. That would be the optimal thing with the prison. Can't do that, so I've looked at a way to further streamline that and actually hopefully save us quite a bit of money next fiscal year with purchasing meals. We've set up a purchase account with Stop and Shop, looking at doing some like frozen meals, frozen breakfast type things at only a couple dollars per meal. Versus, if we went to McDonald's and now all of a sudden that cheeseburger meal that used to cost us like $3.99 is now costing us about almost $8.99. So looking at further reducing costs there next year, so that's why I was willing to cut back on that, and hopefully that works out for us that way. Testing and accreditation, we've reduced that number. We accredited through the state of Connecticut. At this point, we've decided to put on hold the CLIA accreditation. So while we're not actively seeking that level of accreditation, because we have paid into it, they don't just kick you out the door, right? So we basically, we're put on pause. So if at some point we decide to, go that route, would be fantastic. But I think what needed to happen when I spoke to the commission months ago was, we kind of need to learn to crawl before we can walk, and walk before we can run, and just getting very rapidly from zero accreditation all the way up to through tier 1, 2, and 3 with Lieutenant Jazerski behind me here. A lot of work goes into that, and there's only one person maintaining that accreditation process right now. So as we are set up to have an evaluation here very soon, we need to make sure that we can just even maintain a state accreditation before we go jumping into CLIA, because it's a lot more stringent and there's a lot more added to that, a lot more standards. So I put us on hold with CLIA for now, so that's why there's going to be a reduction in that line, so it's not going to account for that. However, just to, again, think about in the future, kind of like we do with CIP, there could be a year down the road, a year from now or 2 years from now, where we say, hey, we're good, we've managed the state accreditation process, we're feeling good, everything's worked out, and I think we're ready to go to that next step, and maybe we go then. But that's for future discussion. But that's why you're seeing a reduction there. And that is the end of the police department budget. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much. Start to my left. Jason, any?
I have several, and I think some of them are probably too big or maybe not appropriate at this time. But I think the elephant in the room is I don't see anything representing the Chief Finkelstein, the money that's paying to give him his due process. Is that something that's completely separate from the police budget?
Correct. That's not in our police budget.
Here's an easy one. What is National Night Out?
So National Night Out is it's the ability to have the department have a very good positive interaction with the members of the community, right? So it's I guess at this point, because the term's been coined so much, it's a non-threatening environment, right? There's bounce houses, there's music, there's vendors, there's games, there's face painting, there's things for, adults and children to come in. We set up static displays with some of the equipment that the department uses for people to come in, learn about, talk to an officer, have a coffee, have a sandwich with them. We do it at Flanders School, take up that whole yard there. Other members of the community who own farms in town, who have horses, they've brought those down, so as like a part of a petting zoo, so that's part of it as well. It's just a very positive community engagement event that occurs, and it happens nationally, so we're not the only department that does that. However, there's a little bit of a cost set. Most of the officers, with the exception of probably 2 who are on duty, or we hire 1 just because of the type of equipment is there, are all there on a volunteer basis. So this is basically to assist in putting that together, getting all these food truck vendors there, getting the bounce house stuff there. The union does put in some money for this as well, so it's not the full burden on the town to deal with that, because it is such a positive event. Kind of just think about like Touch a Truck, right? It's the same concept.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Since there's all these inflationary pressures on everyone's budget, I'm wondering if the specter of regionalization has reared its head recently at all.
As far as,
Well, you talk about food prices going up. Can police departments work together to use food vendors to have more buying power against food vendors?
and that's kind of where, we look for, I'm a fan of the regionalization process, right? Because if I treat this budget like I treat my wallet. So if it's, if I can save $1, Kevin as well, I talk to him frequently on places where we can save and do things better and more efficiently. So I have looked out there, I've reached out to Waterford. That's kind of why we're going the route with at least the charge account with Stop and Shop. So if for example, right now, if we have a prisoner at the PD, that officer or the sergeant is going to end up having to drive up to McDonald's, get a meal that used to cost us $4. That was the price we had worked out with them, but because the expense has gone up, that meal now costs about $7 to $9. If we have that person over a weekend, we have to provide them 3 meals a day. So, and if it's a holiday on Monday, well, court's not until Tuesday, so there's 3, 6, 9, there could be upwards of, 12 to 14 meals that the town has to provide, and if we're looking at $8 to $9 a piece, that's kind of crazy. So, talking to other departments as well, some use theirs. That's how we got turned on to the McDonald's thing, because this was a reality when we went independent, had that facility open for us down there a few years ago, and say, hey, how do we feed the prisoners? First thing we did was go after the state and ask the prison, because that's what we used to do with the troop. Because it's state agency to state agency, no issue. I think they're just looking at a liability thing. If a prisoner does something to one of these bagged lunches and they're giving it to a municipal department, even though they're our friends, neighbors in town, where's the liability fall on the state at that point, right? So if something occurred with the state police to a state police prisoner, maybe the liability's not there because it's state agency to state agency. So talking to Waterford recently, this is why I kind of approach Stop and Shop, is I can get meals at $1.99 a piece. The cells have part of the sink/toilet unit in there has potable water fountain. So there's already water in there provided. So I think by reducing those costs there, we're going to realize a significant savings, at least in the food portion of it, for next fiscal year, for sure. Now, if this works out, if I get with Waterford and look at them and say, hey, yes, this program is working out for us, I want to test it first, right, before I go jumping in full feet, then maybe, we look at it and do a regional thing, and maybe the buying power does go up, and maybe instead of, going in there and trying to buy these things on sale, 20 at a time, sending an officer in there, or I'm there on my day off, maybe we ask them to order us cases of these types of meals and get it, more closer to their cost. I'm sure they still want to make $1 or $2 off it, but I think that's something that's absolutely feasible, and I have thought about.
Thank you. My final question is about SROs.
Okay.
Does that budget come out of education?
No, so we pay, the SRO is paid out of us. So that is a PD employee right now. We have had talks about it. We have had talks about adding an SRO. Of course, there would be a cost, and I think there's probably some joking at one point during one of these meetings where, Jeff Newton was here and we said, well, if you guys want to, bear the cost of the SRO, we'll definitely add another body to it, but that would have to, of course, be the salary and the fringe rates and everything that go with it.
So that's reflected in this budget, just in personnel?
Just in personnel, yes. Yeah, it's not pulled out individually.
If for some reason that position was completely eliminated, that would not reflect your budget at all, because that officer would still be a part of the force, and would still be getting hours.
Correct, in which is what they do now, right? So when the children go on extended vacations throughout the school year, that officer, which right now is Officer Don Hull, he comes back to the PD and works during those days off. During the summer months, he comes back and works the regular rotation schedule with everybody else while school's out of session. We do put him back on that SRO schedule a couple weeks prior to the beginning of the school year again, because we need to allow him time to update any of the materials that he's going to need, get up to speed on anything that may have come out over the summer months. Any law changes, any curriculum changes, anything that he works out with the school system and the security guys up there as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Okay.
I'll turn to Candace.
Yes, I have no questions. Great thinking out of the box, so to partner with Stop and Shop to get that cost down. I think that was great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Ken. Don?
Michael, big dollars. Overtime, in the budget, makes up about 14% of the salary.
All right.
How does that relate to other departments that are comparable, say Saybrook, Groton, Waterford? What do they typically budget the percentage of overtime?
So,
And to follow up on that too, is that overtime included, or is that from all the projects that are going on now down at Flanders?
now, so the projects down at Flanders are completely separate entity. So that overtime is paid by the actual companies themselves.
Good, okay.
So this money here just covers, like I said, all the paid time off, the different PTO things that officers have that they can earn. And again, with the cost, and for years, a decade. I mean, this has always been, a question that comes up through Board of Finance. I did it when the resident troopers were here, and I was presenting our budget back then. When Chief Finkelstein came on, that was a question when he was sitting out here and watching me do the budget for 15-16 fiscal year. It's a nature of the beast. They are all comparable around us as
Okay.
far as.
Are they in, like, say, 13 to 15%, or are they?
I don't know the actual percent number, but when I look at their numbers, so Waterford has 50 officers, right? Their overtime budget is much higher than ours. We've got 30 officers here.
Even with 50 officers?
What I'm saying is theirs is much more than ours.
Well, that's what I'm saying, they shouldn't have as much overtime.
They've got different capacities that those guys are filling, right? So they've got overtime. I'm not going to say, that's why I said don't hold me to 13 or 15% without me actually pulling their budget, looking at it, and doing the numbers. I don't have that.
And the only other question I had was, Mike, under operating expenses, what are training supplies that come up to $75,000? What kind of items are in training supplies?
So looking at training supplies, you're looking at ammunition. So we've had that's one of the things.
Yeah.
So that's had a significant increase over the past, 10 years for sure, but definitely over the last 5 years. We get tasers, handcuffs, batons, pays for training. So part of that pays for like tuitions. So that's always been a weird line over the years, where some of, like, if I were to send you to class, Don, and that class costs $895 because it's an EMT recertification course or something like that, that money for that course comes out of here.
Okay. Thanks, buddy.
If there aren't any other questions, Mike, thank you very much, and thanks for working with us on the budget.
Yeah.
I know you put a lot of time into it, and appreciate all the meetings you attended, helping us get here. It's just unfortunately, isn't the year to expand the service, and I'm hopeful that next year we'll be in a different situation. So
Right.
thank you very much.
Okay. We got animal control next.
Yeah, yeah. You're going to do that one too. Thank you.
Yes.
And that's 226.
Okay, so Looking at the animal control, the first line, ACO 51618, is, if you recall, ACO Ryan has been brought on to us full-time, so there's a 2.75% pay increase in there for both of them as well. So her hourly rate has gone up, and then now we have their contractual raise, so that is all contractual stuff with them there through UPSU, or actually the unaffiliated, sorry. Overtime, I'm not going to get into the exacts, but there's some times where the ACO needs to be out right now for personnel reasons, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So we're asking for an increase because ACO Ryan's going to have to step in on probably some more occasions. And other than that, those are the only two increases. Everything under the operating has stayed at 0%. And actually, veterinary services, again, working with you guys, reduce that by $1,000 because that is a moving target. However, you know, in light of it, in previous expenses and looking at those years and saying, okay, well, we haven't used it, so we'll say let's take $1,000 this year and see if that works. Same thing with training. We've reduced that down as well. Now that Allison is here as full-time, there are some mandatory trainings that they have to go to, but felt that, you know, reducing it by $1,000 was not going to have any kind of significant impact on that purpose.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Candace, any questions on this budget?
No, I have no questions. Sorry, it takes me a few minutes to get to the mute button to unmute it, so forgive me.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. We're good. Okay, so then we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our final item tonight is the East Lyme Fire Service. And we have Chief Bundy approaching. That's number 225.
First. All right. There we go. No, give it to me again, what I gotta do. Okay. All right. Space. Perfect. You good to go, everybody? I'm good. Good evening. This year I did something a little different. Hopefully each one of you got that. I prepared an annual report for the Board of Selectmen, which will coincide with the presentation that I'm going to give regarding our budget. It pretty much gives you a state of where our department's at, and will hopefully provide some clarity and maybe answer some of the questions that will come as a result of the budget. And when you look at it, we have a pretty substantial increase in our salary range, and this hopefully will give you some of the understanding as to why. Starts out with a little bit of just a message from the department. You don't need to read that, you folks can do that. Give you a little explanation of what our organization is broken down to as we stand today. You have 2 paid chief officers. You have 11 full-time firefighter EMTs. We are supplemented by a group of 5 part-time firefighter EMTs. We also have on the books 2 part-time deputy fire marshals. And currently, as of December 2024, we have 12 active, and I use the term active, volunteer firefighters within the town. Of these 12, I note that 2 have been hired on by the town as part-time firefighters, so they're currently town employees. 1 has enlisted into the military, and 5 have left for college. So as you can imagine, that number now has even dropped even further. just a little bit, and again, this will be in that report that I provided to you. There's a little bit about the community and a little bit of history with regards to the department. I noted a few of the headlines that we had here in town, which I think are relevant as it pertains to our service. Last year, we had a fatal fire, which resulted in 2 fatalities here. There was a big high school evacuation due to an incident. We had several teens that were charged with arson. We did have several marine rescues throughout the town. This one I referenced is with a couple of women that were rescued out of the river. And as you all were made aware, we had a big major brush fire season here in the town. Currently, our service has 3 stations, 3 companies. Niantic headquarters over on Grand Street. We have Station 2 over on West Main Street up by York. And then we have the Flanders Fire Station over on the north end of town. I provided you a list of our current fleet of what we have currently in operation. Also, I referenced that I've given you a kind of a timeline of where each one of these apparatuses will either be retired due to end of life or will be due for replacement or refurbing, and that will come into play when we discuss some of our capital. Some of our specialty equipment, we have two command vehicles. We have 2 boats that are listed. However, one of them is out of service. It's the 1969 Boston Whaler. We have a forestry unit, and we have 2 service vehicles. We'll break down about our response area. We pretty much cover 34 square miles and 8 square miles of water. Pretty large area. Since our budget is going to focus pretty much on staffing, I've given you a little bit of a breakdown of where we are currently. Currently, we have the full-time firefighters are working a 24/48 schedule with a Kelly Day. Kelly Day is, I'll give you the, for instance, if we work a Sunday through Saturday work week, so if your first day of work is on a Sunday, you would have 48 hours off. Your next day to work that week would be Wednesday, followed by 2 days off. So your next day that you would work would be Saturday. The Kelly Day means that you don't come in for work. It's a day off. So what does that force us to do? That forces us to fill that Saturday. Every single Saturday is a Kelly Day, regardless of what shift is on, with either a part-timer or with a full-timer on overtime. And if they are on overtime per their collective bargaining agreement, it's double time. We currently have 2 firefighters who are on 24/7 at Station 1, which is headquarters, giving the East Lyme a minimum, and 2 at Flanders. So we have a minimum of 4 firefighters on a 24/7 basis. 2 in Flanders, 2 in headquarters. We are currently staffing the Station 2, which is up on West Main Street, up by Rocky Neck, with a part-timer, 14 hours a day from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., when they're available. The thing with part-timers, you have no control over their availability. You can't make them work. So on average through the year, we have about 50 hours per week where we utilize a part-timer based on their availability. And the rest of that would be either unfilled at Station 2 or covered by a full-time firefighter on overtime. A lot of questions have come up recently and within the last part of the last year with regards to the current status of our volunteer service. So what we've done is we've researched and we pulled all the numbers. So I'll give you the data as it pertains to the volunteer fire service. From July 1st to December 31st last year, 2024, we had a total of 12 individual volunteer firefighters who responded in one capacity or another. 12. You had one volunteer firefighter during that period of time who responded 29 times. You had another volunteer we responded 25 times. And as you see, as you go down the list, that number decreases dramatically. During that time period of July 1st through December 31st, we had 1,963 calls. That amounts to 77 volunteer responses, less than 4%, which means your full-time firefighting staff is staffing your service 96% of the time. These are just a couple of articles that have been pulled by some major publications, and again, it's the links to them are in your packet, addressing volunteerism throughout in the fire service throughout the United States. And you will find that this is not a problem unique to the town of East Lyme. This is a systemic problem across America. We went back 10 years. In 2014, you had 84 active volunteer firefighters in the town. When I took over as the interim chief in 2024, you had 12. And as you see, the trend just continues to decrease as the years pass. Another breakdown showing you the percentages of the decrease in volunteering. In 2024, you've lost 85% of your volunteer allotment. And I note that this year in January 2025, we've had one volunteer firefighter respond to one call. And again, I do want to note, this problem predates any of the administration sitting here today, as well as the board. This has been a continuing problem going back the last 10 years. When we talk about the response, we need to talk about our call volume. Again, we went back to 2009. In 2009, we had 2,100 plus calls. Last year, we had 3,500, over 3,500. We've shown an increase of 47% increase in our call volume. So as our staffing decreases, our call volume increases. Just a little visual chart to show the upward trend for the last 10 years. That upward trend in the last 10 years has averaged 3.7% increase, and if we continue on the same trajectory, you'll see that within the next 10 years, we'll be up over 5,000 calls for service, if the trend continues. This is our current, this is a little bit of a visualization of the firefighter, the full-time firefighter staff. In 2003, you had 6 full-time firefighters. 2004, you hired your 7th. In 2017, that number jumped to 9. 2023, we hired a 10th. And the year after, we hired the 11th. So we are where we are currently at. If you look and go back 10 years, the green line will depict the call volume, and then you'll look, you have the blue line trending down is your volunteers. The gold line is the total amount of firefighters, both volunteer and career. We're not keeping up with the trend. We're not keeping up with the calls for service. The last slide before I get into the actual budget is basically the bullets of what's in your annual report, which I hope you'll take the time to read. It will explain some of the mandates that we're under, some of the staffing requirements that we're under, and it'll just give you an idea of what the service is doing. It'll talk about our community involvement, who we rely on for mutual aid, our current situation with our stations and our apparatus and all that, the things that we do for fire prevention and our community outreach. because you have a small group of people who are doing an awful lot of work in this town, and they are totally running short-staffed. In the report, before we get to the budget, I referenced the fact that I stand before you tonight with my budget. Initially, to do this job effectively, we need to add a minimum of 7 firefighters. We should be at 18, so that we have the ability to staff these 3 fire stations effectively around the clock. Looking at the numbers and trying to do this in an economical way for the taxpayers, we tried to find creative ways of bringing it back to, let's hire only 5, let's hire this many, let's hire this many. So tonight I'm standing before you asking for the hiring of 1 more firefighter to bring us to 12 effective July 1, and then in January add a 13th. We are still going to be way short. We should be hiring a minimum of 4 more, bringing us to 15. We do the budget. How do we do this? We'll start at the very top with personnel services. Fire chief and deputy chief salaries shows an increase of 6.6%. That does not reflect an hourly wage increase. That is increasing our hours worked by the week. We are going from a 37.5-hour work week to a 40-hour work week.
With no GWI.
I'm sorry?
There's no.
There's no GWI.
So just so everyone knows, that 6.67, the rest of the public safety personnel in town are 40-hour week employees. When I did the budget, I noticed there was 2 individuals, a chief and a deputy chief, that are 37.5-hour employees. So in order to just keep the standard of 40 hours for public safety, we've increased their hours to 40. This is without a GWI. So just want you to know that.
Administrative assistant shows a substantial bump. That bump reflects the fact that last year she was a temporary part-time employee, and through the budget year was made full-time, but only at 30 hours. So being at 30 hours, that number now reflects that she's going to go whole like us for a 40-hour work week, which I note at the bottom under the revenue service, on the revenue part of our line item on the bottom of the budget, we're estimating revenue of about $150,000, which is generated through plan reviews, permits, and other administrative functions. She's critical in the bookkeeping, the scheduling, the invoicing of all of that revenue, which is why I feel it's important that her going to 40 hours is only going to increase that opportunity to increase that particular item at the bottom. Wage increase for the union firefighters, that's contractual. Part-time employees, we budgeted the $232,000. That's for 16 hours a day of Station 2 coverage and part-time coverage on Saturdays. It's also, we're going to utilize some of that for part-time fire inspectors, which, as I indicated in the beginning, we have 2 of them on staff, that we're going to start utilizing some of them to help out with some of the inspections and hopefully start offsetting some of the costs by generating revenue in terms of plan reviews and inspections. The big jump, overtime. And as I explained before, we calculated our overtime in the worst case scenario, our Saturday. Saturday, there are a minimum of 4 firefighters at double time and a half if we can't get any other coverage, is going to eat up a majority of that. That's not including any time off, vacations, or trying to staff and supplement that one person over at Station 2. Longevity stayed the same. Working our way down, the rest of the budget pretty much is a 0% increase. OSHA, that's to maintain our OSHA requirements. Radio maintenance was the same, building maintenance was the same, small equipment was the same, training was the same. Actually, no, I correct myself. Training, there's an increase in the training because we consolidated all of our budgets together, the fire marshal budget, the paid staff budget, and all the volunteers. So all of the training, Eric and I as fire marshals, we are mandated annually to maintain a certain level of continuing education credits. Normally that would come out of the fire marshal budget and is now rolled into all together. The training budgets for the paid staff. We're required to have them have certain amount of training for live burns, their EMTs, specialty training. Last year we contracted out to get everybody certified to the technician level in rope rescue, which actually had to get put off because of the brush fire season, so we're actually doing it in the springtime. But there are certain technical components of the job that require specialized training, and as the first responders, the first people who are responsible to mitigate these events, confined space, technical rescues, it's imperative that they have these certifications to do that. So some of that is for that. That's also to include training of the volunteers, any volunteers that need to go to, whether it be a Fire 1, Fire 2, maintain certifications, we're actually taking that out of there as well. Fire hydrant maintenance, that's an increase. We have no control over that. That's something that's, we just can't, that's something that we get charged by the water department, so it's just, I hate to say it is what it is, but that's what it is. Volunteer expenses, $12,000, $6,000 to each department. That's to assist them with their recruitment and retention. And then medical supplies is a new line item. I had put in for 25, it's down to 18. Prior to this year, any medical supplies that were placed on our vehicles was supplied by the East Lyme Ambulance Fund. Recently, as everybody I'm sure is aware of, we signed an agreement to where they became an independent agency, to which now they are responsible for providing this service. We are, as an R1 responder, which is the first responders for them, going out in a fire truck, we're still going to maintain a certain level of medical supplies. Now the cost to supply and outfit our rigs are incumbent upon us, so that's what that money is for. Telephones, that's just what the rate is now. Uniforms went up slightly. Again, with the hiring of new people, comes with the hire, which is the acquisition of turnout gear, bunker gear, uniforms, and so there's a cost involved with that. Miscellaneous supplies, we upped that because the FMO miscellaneous supplies, things that we would use for like fire prevention, things that we would need to run day-to-day stuff, got absorbed into that, so that's why there's an increase with that. Capital.
That's your operating?
Yeah, that's my operating budget.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate all the detail you went to and the report, both reports that you prepared. Looking forward to reading that, and very informative. Thank you. Jason, do you have any questions?
I do. So I've been pushing some numbers around here. You'll have to forgive me, these are pretty cursory. But our part-time budget proposed by the first selectman, 232,846 divided among 5 part-time people is about $47,000 a year per person, correct?
If we were to keep it at 5, we are looking at, we currently have a stack of resumes. We're looking to bring on additional part-time firefighters because we can't rely on 5 to supplement this because they are part-timers. They have other jobs. So if we were to maintain that, and they were going to work all those hours that are set aside for them, then yeah, that would be $46,000, assuming your math is correct, and I'm not saying, no reason to doubt that, but the goal is to actually bring on additional firefighters so that we can plug and play and put them in different positions so that we can try to lower that original overtime line item.
Okay. Building towards
Jason,
an
real quick.
eventual. Oh, yes.
The back work paper on the screen here, I think it's like page 6. There's a little breakdown. So that says with firefighter 12, and the bottom one should say with 13 FFs, not 15. That was our initial plan. So really, we're looking at up through July 1 through Jan 1, 158 hours a week in part-timers, and then going Jan 1 through June 30, we're looking, or other way, so 182 hours a week from July 1 to Jan 1, and 158 hours a week from Jan 1 to June 30 of next year. And that because so it's not just firemen; it's also including part-time fire marshals, the fire marshals, in that calculation as well. So I just wanted to.
So I'm kind of pushing this ball forward. Same kind of thinking. The union firefighters at $1,149,075 for 11 people is roughly $104,000 per person over the course of the year. Now, I've looked at the overtime cost, which is $510,026, divided among 2 people, as proposed by you, to be roughly $250,000. So, could you make the case in all this math that I'm muddying through that hiring 2 new people would greatly reduce the amount of money spent on overtime?
I don't believe that it certainly will cut into that. It's not going to give you the coverage of, it's not going to give you the continued coverage that you have or what you've experienced with 2 in one station, 2 in another station, and 2 in the third station. Because the way the collective bargaining agreement works, with the way they have it spelled out, is that they can't work alone. So you can't put a full-time firefighter in one of the stations by themselves, where with a part-timer you technically can, because there's no collective bargaining agreement to tell you can't. So by hiring the 2, as you mentioned, firefighter 12 will bring us to what we're currently operating at, which is two firefighters in one station, 2 firefighters in another station, which currently that firefighter 12 has been supplemented by either filling it with an overtime or with a part-timer. So essentially you haven't gained anything in reducing the overtime other than that one shift, that one position. Firefighter 13 in January of 26 is going to give you now 1 person that I have to plug them here, I can plug them there, but you're still not gaining that full complement of firefighters in the outlying station. So you're either going to not fill that and cut service, or you're going to fill that second position because you only have one to put there with either a part-timer who you can't control, because as the averages have shown, they're only covering 50 hours of the 158 hours, so you got to fill it with an overtime position.
There seems to be a unique negative feedback loop, President, that these externalities that are causing overtime are making it hard to find money to pay people to do the job, which is some kind of crazy Twilight Zone math. We're the ones that sit and make the decision, but what would be the off-ramp from this?
Well, I think the off-ramp is what I initially said, and the town is in no position to do that, is to hire seven full-time firefighters, bring your allotment to 18, and then you have 4 shifts of 2, and now you have 2, 2, and 2. So the only time your overtime budget actually will drop, because now you only have to fill when somebody goes on vacation or when somebody's sick, because you're not filling You're not filling that open shift on a regular basis because now you have somebody permanently assigned there.
So see if I have this right, you can only attack the overtime budget once you get to the level of 18.
Well, no, no, absolutely not. You can attack the overtime budget by not filling the shifts,
Right,
But you lose coverage.
but you lose coverage.
you lose coverage.
And all Saturdays are double time.
And all Saturdays are double time.
So off the bat, if we bring 4 firemen in, which is our base essentially, 4 firemen, we are paying for 8 firemen every Saturday because they're coming in at double time.
You're paying the Saturday overtime regardless because of the Kelly Day. They're in their agreement, they don't work Saturday. So you have to fill it with somebody. You have to fill it with either a part-timer, and that's 4 of them because you need 2 and 2. 2 per station. That's not even a dressing station, the outlying station. Or, worst case scenario, we don't get any part-timers, and now you're staffing it with full-timers at double time. But the short answer is sure, you can attack the overtime problem, you cut service, you don't staff station 2.
I know as a citizen of the town, walking around during those brush fires, you could smell it, and I'm sure that's nothing that's new to you guys, but to lay people, it was very unnerving, and I think it really drove home to all the people in this town the importance of the work that you do, and I think no one in this town would balk at the opportunity to increase your resources to make sure that the town has continued to have this really excellent service. I understand that this is a tough budget year, but have there been plans to perhaps ramp this up over 10 years, 5 years? I mean, we can't sustain 7 people in 1 year, no problem. But surely there's got to be some kind of tiered ideology.
I believe in your packet, it shows the proposal to go through fiscal year 2029, bringing us up to 18.
Oh, okay.
So the short answer is yes, sir, we have. And I would like to comment on your statement regarding the brush fires. Some would argue that that was an anomaly this year, that was kind of a one-off, a unique situation, but there was recently an article, and I believe it was either in The Day or one of the local newspapers that did a big story on the brush fires, not only here but across the whole state. And our counterparts with DEEP, their intelligence, their vision is telling us that that's not a one-off. That is going to become the norm of what we should be expecting moving forward during our brush fire season. So, a lot of our budget and a lot of our resources were utilized and eaten up during that time frame because we didn't budget for it. We didn't plan to have pallets of fire suppression foam delivered to fire scenes because we just didn't have enough on hand. That's something we have to start thinking about. And we were fortunate, and it's kind of a double-edged sword to say, and kind of productive to say this. The Hawthorne fire out in Berlin afforded us the ability to have resources be deployed here in East Lyme, because there were already resources from across the country, from California, from Washington, from Oregon, from as far as Quebec. They were already in the state. So when we started, as the rest of the state started to experience this uptick with all these fires, because of the way the system works, they started deploying these resources. Now, we don't know what the future holds here, but if we go into September, October, November of 2025, and we start experiencing the same type of scenarios, we may be left to ourselves and our mutual aid partners. And quite honestly, you can only rely on your mutual aid so often because they're going to have to deal with their own incidents in their own towns. So imagine having 4 guys or 4 firefighters with 1, 2, best case scenario, 12 volunteers dealing with the magnitude of fires that we had with no outside assistance. Oh, and still respond to everything else that's going on in town because we had over 3,500 other calls. So I think we're kind of in a quandary, I guess you could call it. We're still trying to catch up to where we should be. And we kind of got exploited to see how far behind we are. And I agree with you, we can't hire 7 right off the rip, I get that. But we really seriously need to take a look at our staffing, because we want to rely, we're doing what we can to try to recruit and retain and come up with creative programs to generate new interests with volunteers. But this is a problem across the country. It's not there. So what else do? Do you maintain status quo? Do you cut your service? Or do you bite the bullet and try to increase and bring staffing to where it should be? That's why I presented all of the scenarios. I presented where we should be and what it's going to cost, and we worked down from there. And this is, in my estimation, a bare minimum of where we need to go for the next fiscal year.
That's it for my questions. Thank you.
Jason, I think it's in your packet, I'm not quite sure, but we did a long-term projection of hiring a firefighter every 6 months to get us to the 18, minimal staffing of 18 firefighters, which would be 3 crews of 6 firemen, so you'd have 2 at each of the stations.
Okay, I see that now.
Yeah, I think that's in there. And, if I may comment, we've really started to try to focus on strategic planning, not just in the fire service, but in other areas as well. And we've talked about a strategic plan for the fire service. And the ideal number, I believe, and I think what we talked about, is the 18. I mean, that would be an ideal number to try to achieve. We can't do it in 1 year, but I think, adding the 1 this year gets us to that 12. That's a number that really works with the 24-48 schedule and helps us to become a little bit more efficient, at least respect. That helps us a little bit with the overtime. The next step is, as Kevin said, if we can come up with, keep adding 1 firefighter periodically, whether it's 6 months or every year or whatever the frequency has to be, to get us to that level. That's got to be the next goal.
This plan, Dan,
Yeah.
that we have in front of us here adds essentially, so this year we're adding 1.5 firefighters,
1.5.
right? Because the other firefighter is in Jan 1 hire. Next year, we're also planning on hiring 1 July 1, 1 Jan 1, so that's 1.5 firefighters for next year as well. But that is a 2 firefighter budget increase, because you have to we're only budgeting half this year, next year has to absorb the full, so essentially for the next 2.5 years, we're adding 2 firemen to the budget, right? So this current year we're adding 1.5, next year we're going to add 2, the year after we're going to add 2, then the following year we're adding 1 to get us the full accompaniment of 18 firefighters.
It's a heavy lift, but one I think that hopefully the residents of town agree that we need to try to do and are willing to pay for it. And it needs to be done, but we're going to try to work in that direction. Candace, do you have any comments, questions?
I do. Hold on 1 second. So that was a lot, and I want to thank you for your detailed budget presentation. There's been a tremendous amount of changes, and some people would say that there have been changes for the good. Some people could say that they've been changes for the bad. I think that across the country, that this has been a challenge just for volunteering in general, generationally. We don't see as the volunteering the way that we used to, and specifically within the fire department. So there's no, I think, question that some changes needed to be made and that type of thing. But I will say that listening, right, and then trying to comprehend what the impact is truly going to be on the taxpayers here in East Lyme. You're saying that's a heavy lift. I would say that's a very heavy lift, and a lift that I'm not too sure that the taxpayers here can do. So I think there's going to be more conversation on this. for sure. I think it's up to us to pass along a budget that is responsible to the Board of Finance, versus just pushing something forward for them to deal with, I guess. But I think there needs to be more discussion on that and what it's going to look like moving forward. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. Don?
Chief, not to be pointed, just following along with what Candace said there. Is double time, you quoted double time and a half for Saturday.
Oh, no, it's just double time.
Oh, just, okay. You look at the tape, you'll see.
If I did, I misspoke. I'm gonna say just only double time, but it's double
The
time.
Kelly Day, is that contractual?
It's contractual,
Okay, as is the double time?
correct.
Okay. Do the tribes pay that?
There are, and I don't know if the short answer is, I don't know if the tribe does. I do know that there are other municipalities where they have the Kelly Day, and they do get double time. So it's not, I won't say it's not unheard of, but it is something that does happen through collective bargaining.
Okay, that's why I'll leave it at that then. It just seems pretty rich.
This isn't a one-off.
No, okay,
Yeah.
I know that.
But-
It seems pretty rich. That's,
Yeah.
I'm not working Saturday. We don't work Saturday. So, a quick solution may be to close one of the stations, but risky. Taxpayers won't accept that, and as Candace says, I'm telling you right now, the feedback on a tax increase is gonna be
I understand that entirely, which is why I wanted to present all of that out there.
good job. Good
And I think, and again, I think this goes back to the gentleman's question about how are we going to attack the overtime? One way is you don't staff those shifts. You maintain it at, we're going to have, if this passes and we go to 12, you have 2 firefighters in one station, 2 firefighters in another, and then one station goes unstaffed.
Is a volunteer a volunteer? Does he get paid at all?
No.
Okay. I was gonna say, does that count as a person and he get minimum wage or something?
Well, and I think that's why it goes back to what I said before. We're trying to get creative in how we can even bring them in the door, but let's, to that point, if the requirements to hire somebody as a part-timer, to be a full-time firefighter, you need firefighter 2, you need to be an EM, so be a firefighter, a part-time firefighter, you can just be a firefighter 1. So if we had a volunteer that was an EMT and was a firefighter 1, was to say that we couldn't hire him as a part-timer. And then they would work the part-time shifts, because now we can get creative in the schedule, because once they still have to go through the training, they have to get certified, they have to be cleared to drive and do all the things that we would need them to do to operate alone. But that is something that we are exploring those options.
It's like minor league, and one day you can get to the big league.
Well, and that's why it goes back to before. We actually had, of those 12 volunteers, 2 of them we hired as part-time firefighters, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And I would hope that if things move forward, and we do get new positions, that they would be interested, and we would take them on in a full-time capacity, because we've kind of built that, I don't want to say a feeder, but there's a feeder into the program. Getting somebody like that would come in, absolutely. But to your point about closing a station, well, I guess that has to be considered, because we're either going to fill those shifts or we're not, because we don't have the staffing to do both. And if you're going to fill
I
them,
agree with that too.
if you fill them, there's a cost involved to do that. So what's the acceptance amongst the taxpayer? Because I only have so many, I have holes and I only have so many plugs.
Gotcha.
So,
And the town's not getting smaller.
and the town's not getting smaller and the job's getting busier. So, in the summertime when Chief Masick mentioned our population doubles, well, what do you think that does to our call volume?
In preparation for tonight, that's why I asked a question on Saturday night, that one call that went by my house. I wasn't sure of the procedure. You had 2 ambulances, 2 fire trucks, and a police vehicle go. to one call. That's what I thought. But apparently there was two at the same time.
See, now, with the change with the service agreement now with the ambulance fund, why there were two ambulances there, I can't, maybe because one was coming back, one got there first, I don't know, but given the circumstances of what that call was, that's what the firemen are doing in the stations now, being that R1, quote unquote. They're the ones who are going to get in an apparatus, they're going to go, they're still EMTs, they're going to provide the same level of medical service that the ambulance people are going to. The only thing they're not going to do is put them in a fire truck and drive them to the hospital. They're essentially doing the same work that they were doing before when they were staffing the ambulance. So, and given this circumstances, and again, it comes in as a cardiac arrest or a cardiac, that's a pretty significant event. It's an all hands on deck. So if they're available, they're going to go. So that's why you're going to get, because you've got two personnel in one firehouse, two personnel in another firehouse. They're each going to get in an apparatus, so that's going to bring 4 people there. Whoever's going to get there first.
Start there.
Yeah, and start care.
Yeah.
The police, we just recognized, we just had a recognized save on an infant where in the middle of the night where the police were the first people there and they were helping the parents do CPR. They're out and about. Thank goodness that they're responding. So I think in those particular cases, that's where you're going to see that type of response. The only thing that's different is that we're just not putting people in fire trucks driving them to the hospital. But it's when those things are going on, because you don't just get that one call. You're going to get that one call, and then you're going to get another call, and then you're going to get a fire alarm, and then you're going to get whatever. And I think that's where the system starts to get taxed. It starts to get stretched thin, and we have to rely on our mutual aid people to come in and help us out, which we're thankful and we're grateful for. So,
Dan, may I ask a question, maybe make a comment here?
Yeah. Candace, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to ask first. So first, Chief Bundy, is it possible to just create an on-call list for people? So not necessarily hire them as part-time or full-time, just people that collectively are on a list that if they're needed, they're called upon and they come in and they get a stipend for working for the certain amount of day.
I think that's exactly, I think, the concept of what we were talking about. I would have to defer to the, our legal people of whether or not,
Okay.
would they be town employees at that point? And if so, would we be paying them out of the part-time budget? But I think that's what we're trying to explore the option of doing. We're also looking at
We got to think of ways to try to, because, I mean, first of all, nobody wants to be running without coverage, right? That's alarming, and that's going to alarm our people, right? And then, for Don's comment, as far as, we're going to shut one down possibly. I mean, yeah, that's going to concern a lot of people too, right? So public safety and how people are getting services and receiving services. I mean, that's a concern. The other thing is, this seems to be kind of an alarming amount. I don't know if anybody else is alarmed, but I kind of am. And listening to the needs now of what, from my memory, was projected as kind of a good thing to move forward with. I would have loved to have heard all of these needs prior to some of these major decisions being made. So I for one, didn't foresee all of the things that you just came to the table with, and I guess I'm curious, Dan, were these foreseeable needs? Were you aware of these needs before some of these major decisions were made on the fire department?
Well, one of the big things that happened this past year, we had a paid firefighter contract that had been put off for, 2 years?
Correct.
And it was never renegotiated.
Right.
So that we couldn't continue just extending a contract without renegotiating it.
Correct. But what I just got was, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that in that agreement, it was agreed upon where this Kelly Day or this Saturday was going to be open, right?
So, so what happened was, there, in the context of the negotiations of the contract, there is always give and take. And And without, diving deep right here into what those negotiations looked like, there were things that the fire service gave up and things that were an advantage to the town. One of the things was, what was it, comp time? There was a,
Elimination of comp time.
what was that?
Elimination of comp time.
Elimination of comp time.
Yep.
The fire service agreed to that. And it was, but the trade-off was that they really wanted to go to the 24-48 schedule, which ultimately is an advantage to both sides, because what that does is it allows us to be on a similar schedule to other municipalities. So that gives us the opportunity to attract firefighters from other municipalities that might want to work here, whereas if it was the older schedule, which is really antiquated now in the view of things, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So there were trade-offs, there were advantages to the town, advantages to the fire service, but it was a negotiation that had been put off for years, and I took it on to get it done, and we did. And so, yeah, there were trade-offs.
Okay.
And Kelly Day was one of them, but that is not unheard of. It's that's in the 24-48 schedules, that's typical, which is my understanding.
Okay. Can we look at how other municipalities have been paying for it and if it's been beneficial to them?
Yeah,
Because I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, that schedule is attractive to firefighters because they can work the 24 hours. They have a day, 2 days off, and they work.
I'm not saying that it's not attractive to firefighters. What I'm asking is how municipalities have been paying for it and how we're going to sell it to our community is just my question.
Well, I mean, that was
I'm
the
not asking
contract.
about
That is
if
the
it's
contract that we
practical.
agreed to.
Yep.
And, in the context of the bigger picture of the entire negotiations, there were advantages to both sides and compromises on both sides. And we ended up with a modern contract that will help us down the road in the future, I believe.
Thank you.
If I could just
Yep.
add one thing with regard to that, with the schedule. The former schedule before they went to the 24-48 had them front-loading all of the personnel on the first shift or the day shift. So in some cases, you would have 7 firefighter EMTs running Monday through Friday during the day shift, leaving 2 firefighters on the overnight shift and no full-time firefighters on the evening shift. We were relying on part-time firefighters. So, and I think to Mr. Cunningham's point, some of the trade-off was spreading out the coverage consistently throughout the 24-hour period, where you were getting coverage throughout 24 hours as opposed to front-loading it on the day shift and not having any coverage on the overnight.
Yes, and that was viewed as very important to have equal coverage around the clock instead of, I don't want to be a jerk, but you were lucky you had your fire during the day because everybody was there, and God forbid you have it in the middle of the night when there's a diminished staff. Now we have consistency throughout the schedule, which is very important.
It also brought us up to being compliant with NFPA standards of having 2 firefighters for interior work while having 2 firefighters on the outside. And I know you've heard me in the past reference the 2 in, 2 out rule. Well, we weren't meeting that. And by going to this schedule, it afforded us the ability to be able to do that on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week capacity.
I do remember that, and that is a good note to make. Just one other clarification. So for when you said volunteer firemen, when they would show up to a call, that they're not paid. So they don't receive a stipend of any kind?
Not
My understanding is that they do.
As far as I know, they are not receiving any stipend from the town. Now, the individual departments, whether it be Flanders or Niantic, there are stipend programs through them. Some of them involve monetary, some of them are in gift cards. I know that there was some There was some program where if they responded during an EMS call, they would get compensated as part of the ambulance billing. So I guess I didn't mean to misspoke. There's no compensation from the town, so they would. And I do know that through the active volunteers, they're also eligible for some sort of a tax abatement or some sort of a offset on that as well. So
Was their stipend come from the ambulance fund, or no? Is that separate?
I'm gonna let Eric answer that, because he was the chief, and he's of Niantic, so he can probably explain that a little bit better.
Okay. Hi, Eric, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So there used to be a program in the Nyack Fire Department where they would pay the EMTs a stipend to go on calls. That has since stopped now that East Lyme Ambulance is the employer.
Right.
Flanders had a program where they were giving out gas cards if you went to so many calls, but they've also stopped that.
Okay, so there's no help from volunteers any longer. So it's not essentially, and I'm probably going to use the wrong word, but I would always consider it kind of like a hybrid system where volunteers were part of it and they would offset, right? So that is no longer happening at all. Is that accurate?
That's mostly accurate, yes. There's still the tax abatement, the $1,000 tax abatement, which we have been talking with First Selectman Cunningham about updating, because the state now allows you to go to 2,000. We just got to reevaluate what type of activity you need to do to be awarded that tax abatement.
Okay.
If Candace, if I may, also, going back to when I first got here as the marshal in '22, we had, going back to the numbers, I think it was, 13 volunteers? 23, as I'm looking at 20. In '22, we had 23 volunteers. There were a number of the volunteers that were wearing the volunteer hat that were also employed by the town as part-time firefighters. So, to your point, were they getting compensated? Well, they were getting compensated when they were working, when they were covering shifts. And I think that's kind of what maybe I'm reading into it, what you're alluding to. And I think that's what we're trying to discuss, maybe moving back in some capacity of, rather than volunteering, if we take them on as part-timers, they'll get compensated and maybe pick up some of the slack and thus reducing some of this overtime.
Understood. But if you were to bring them on as on-call, not technically part-time, then I'm guessing, and I might not be positive here, but you wouldn't have to pay insurance and some other things. Is that accurate?
Honestly, I don't know, because right now I don't believe we pay benefits for the part-timers as it stands.
Okay.
So, and if we've got a part-timer and we have to keep it under a certain number of hours weekly, and whether it be 30 or 32, if we maintain a 32-hour average for a part-timer, give them the ability to work 4 8-hour shifts, they don't accrue any benefits, I guess, is the best way to put it.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, just sick time, but.
Candace, and anyone else, there's another aspect to this I think we have to be cognizant of. And first of all, we had a contract that was dated. It hadn't been renegotiated in years. And during that time, you had regulatory changes with the agencies that monitor the standards for fire services.
Yes,
And what are they?
yeah.
What are they? Those are
It's the OSHA standards. They're
then
coming out with a new ruling, which is putting, and I don't want to say unreasonable, but they're putting some pretty strict restrictions on how the fire service and the EMS services are being run.
Then what's the other one?
NFPA. And those are the standards that we operate. They're the ones that give us the guidelines in terms of, how many firemen should be on, the type of apparatus they're riding, all of the procedures that we need to follow.
And so one of the things we've done is been cognizant of those standards. We're trying to be very careful to adhere to them. And
Agreed. Yeah.
And in the past, that wasn't necessarily the case. And so
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
that's very important, but adhering to those standards costs money. And the
Yeah.
other aspect of it is, we're not a town that's populated by single-family houses speckled throughout the town. You now have concentrations of people living in multi-story buildings. You have Gateway, you have other complexes that are, really concentrate people together in one building. And I don't think you can realistically rely on fighting a fire in a structure like that with, volunteers or people that we can maybe call on the phone and get them in. I mean, I think that's a big risk. And so we've had to move into the future and modernize our approach. And the reality is that costs money. And ultimately, the decision will be on the people that live here. They're going to be voting on this budget. Do they want that protection, or are they willing to forego and have something less? And that's ultimately the decision of the taxpayers. But we're trying to propose a compromise here that provides a great level of safety, but is still something that is within our reach financially. That's my pitch.
Okay, well, that was a great pitch. So for anybody that's, listening, I mean, I ask questions for a reason, and it's to create dialogue, and it's nothing, pointed at anybody, so nobody needs to sweat or anything like that, or feel like I'm asking questions for certain reasons other than educating myself, right? Because part of my role is to sell our budget too, and I'm asking questions quite often, to be just perfectly honest with you, are the most relatable questions, and that people are going to be asking, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why I ask questions, and I ask them publicly to have the dialogue publicly. That way, when people go back and they listen to the meeting minutes, they're like, I'm glad either somebody asked that question, and then somebody had, a reasonable explanation. Right? Then everybody's informed. So I hope nobody, no feathers are ruffled, but I am asking questions. I'm probably going to continue to ask some more, and I'm sure that through the entire budget process, this is going to be looked at along with many other things, because at the end of the day, when we're passing a budget, we have town people that, some people can't afford their electric bills. I mean, it's not funny. Like,
No.
people are being pressed. Okay, so, explanations are needed and conversation is needed. So when I said, well, some of this information, I really kind of would have loved to know, some of the needs, right, to continue on with this new model ahead of time, because I don't recall having these conversations until now. And that's all I have. Thank you.
No, Candace, I always appreciate your questions, and it's good that you ask them, and because there are a lot of people sitting out there that, watching this that can't just ask them, and it gives us the opportunity to illuminate the issues and try to come up with what is best. So, no, I don't feel ruffled feathers at all. I appreciate the inquiry and the scrutiny. It's what the town deserves. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Of course. All right. Is there any other commentary? Being none, I want to thank you. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Can I have a second? All in
Second.
favor? Aye. All right. We're adjourned.